Welcome to the Small Magic Podcast, where we discuss the small things you can do to improve your life, your community, and maybe even the world, and meet other people changing the world in their own way. I'm Lisa Demmi. Let's get started. We've got a lot to talk about. Hi, everyone. Lisa here with the Small Magic Podcast, and I am so excited today for our guest. We talked about last week about having a little bit different segment occasionally where we highlight women who are just getting it done in their communities. And one of the first people who came to mind was Miss Melanie Griffin. And just proof that a Gator and a Seminole can get along, right, Melanie?
Allegedly.
So Melanie and I met, man, I don't even know how long ago it was now, 4 years ago?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. And it was a professional relationship initially, but she brought cookies. So I loved her from the beginning. And Melanie's company was actually representing my company at the time. And we liked her so much, we just kept her, right? So, so Melanie, let's just jump right in because people don't like to hear me talk. So why don't you give me a little bit of background on you, a little bit about how you came to be, your position, what you do, and then we'll kind of talk about some specifics.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Melanie Griffin. As Lisa said, I am a shareholder with the Dean Mead Law Firm. I actually manage our Tampa office and serve in our commercial litigation department, doing all kinds of business disputes, and then a lot of managing and administration these days and marketing with the managing shareholder role. And what I always like to tell people is that, prior to this happening, it wasn't necessarily always easy. And Lisa, that may be something you get into in some of your other podcasts, I'm sure. But I was born and raised in Bradenton, Florida by a single parent mother. And she was my first mentor, role model, just awesome person in my life, and love her to death. But we didn't have a lot growing up. My mom was a social worker, and I never knew that. But one of my toughest days was when I learned that we did not have the necessary funding for me to go to a 4-year university. Mm-hmm. And I always like to start with where I am now and where I came from, because I find that a lot of women hold themselves back, that they think that if they're in a certain position that they can't move forward. And so I find that sometimes it's empowering to know that just because you see the end product and it looks really pretty doesn't mean that it didn't start out in a way that had challenges. And, it's a message that you can get there too if you do find yourself facing struggles.
Exactly. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, I'm if you're comfortable with it, I think everybody, I think people, like you said, people see the end result and they think, wow, she's got it made, but they don't realize that oftentimes there's things that happen in that journey to where you are now. And we'll talk about where you're going as well, but talk about some of that if you don't mind.
Absolutely. One of the first struggles that I had was how much of my short story to share. I found that getting scholarships was critical to my success, and I am so thankful for all the donors that made that possible. For that to be possible, I had to be willing to share parts of my childhood and upbringing with interview committees or with the people that were judging my application. So, certainly it's up to each individual how much you feel comfortable sharing about your story. But I do think the more that you do feel comfortable and can open up and relate to others, it will make them want to help you in your journey. So that was one of my first hurdles. Once I got into practice, or maybe even earlier at the college business school level, one of my struggles, having come from a single parent household where it was just 2 females, it was my mom raising me, is that I didn't have the communication skills that were necessary to compete in an industry where within about 7 years of practice, less than 20% of the practitioners are usually females. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself struggling with that both during my internships as well as during my first year of practice. And once I got the communication skills down, that was really helpful to me in terms of the fact that, I'll give you a quick example, women, we often like feedback. Men oftentimes don't write a smiley face or a fantastic in your brief. They're just not going to do
Right.
if they didn't like your work product. A lot of times if there's no news, that is good news. If they didn't like it, they will tell you, and it may not be in a nice fashion. So just being able to take that constructive criticism and also learn how to communicate and solicit feedback. But then that brought out about a whole other issue, was because then once I got used to communicating with men, then I was too short in my communications with women.
Mm.
And so had to figure out that with time balancing. And a small tip for me, as silly as it may sound, I have found that just adding a smiley face or one sentence, hey, how are you doing, either the beginning or an end of an email, makes all the difference in the world, and will still save you time if you want to have a shortened paragraph, but let the reader know that you do actually care about them too, which will take you a long way with women.
I've always found you to be very friendly, very approachable, very relatable. So I must have gotten you after you got over that whole not being able to talk to women thing because you were so used to men. That's interesting, because you would think it would be almost the other way around, and the fact that you kind of had to bring yourself back to some kind of, almost like a midpoint where you could say, all right, I can talk to men and I can talk to women. And you're right, it's very much the same of just putting some little humanistic something, whether it's a smiley face emoji or asking how are you, can make a lot of difference. In moving into, so you're a shareholder, you're a partner, right?
Absolutely, yep.
And so how do you think, and how long did it take for you to get to partner?
About 7.5 years. We have a 7-year full partnership track. So once I began my first full year at the firm, then it was 7 years after that.
Okay. Do you what do you think helped you reach that position? And I realize you have to, kind of play the game. I mean, I don't want to say that and sound like if there's a hidden agenda, but I mean, in business, there's always some kind of, this is what you have to do, and this is how you get there. How, did you follow along with that, that set process, or did you just kind of create your own process and say, I'm just going to do it the Melanie way?
Both. A small magic, you put your own spin on it. For me, certainly, I was involved in the community, and so I had to learn how to balance that. I think I probably out the gate was more involved than some of my peers, and so I had to learn to balance that with work. Two of the things that I feel like I did well, one is that I never forgot that work was my first job. And so if you're younger, that is the best thing you can do, is remember that your partners, the people giving you work, quote unquote, are your clients before you have your own clients. And so making sure that things are done well for them is going to serve you really well. I also never said no. I had an appetite for always helping people, and that included the people, again, that were giving me work. And so that really allowed me to become a jack of all trades at the firm, and to really be able to be ingrained in a number of attorneys' practices and also learn a number of practice areas. So, one of the things that I had in terms of a piece of advice for today that I want to share is plan to succeed and not to fail. I think as women, sometimes we always are planning to fail. And most of us, if we think back on our lives, probably more than not actually succeeded. And so tying that into, being willing to say yes, I didn't let the fact that a project was new or foreign to me hold me back. I was at least willing to try it. And I think that's sometimes something that we find with men, is that they're much more willing to nominate themselves for a job for which they're less qualified than we are. So as women, just going for it and selling yourself sometimes is the biggest part of the game.
Right. Do you feel like do you feel like, I hear many women say, well, I really had to prove myself more than the guys did, more than the men did. Do you feel like that was something you had to deal with as well, and in being an attorney and being in the firm that you're in? Is that, was that a challenge for you, or do you feel like, no, I always kind of, made my own course and really just jumped on whatever and made your own reputation right from the get-go?
Yeah, it was really that. I found that certainly there were things that If anything, I feel like I held myself back more than others held me back. And I see that a lot today, that even though the practice of law, the further you get along, still as a minority women, and you certainly will find clients that still prefer to have a male
Yeah.
attorney, or you might find, someone that prefers to work with a male opposing counsel. So it's not that those discrimination idiosyncrasies don't still exist, but for the most part, I think in our working environment, they accept that you are a female, but I think it's all the implicit bias and then all
Right.
the things we put on our own shoulders, not going after our own positions and believing ourselves, that tend to hold us back.
When did you turn that corner? When did you flip that switch of not holding yourself back?
I feel like it's been an evolving work of process. I will say that one of the biggest times that really happened for me was that I wanted to run for president of the Florida Bar Young Lawyers Division.
Mm.
And at first thought my race would be uncontested. And then all of a sudden learned that I would be in a contested statewide race. And that was overwhelming for me. And it was really my husband that said, go for it. He really had more of that male instinct that, go for it, make your own path. And I think you can do this. And even if you don't, you'll know the end result and feel better than if you hadn't even tried. And so that was really a great learning lesson for me, to get that type of mentorship from him. And then I think later, really it's been within the last year or so, now that I've been practicing over 10 years, that I really feel comfortable in my own skin and have that epiphany of, let's quit focusing on failures or the what ifs. Let's plan for all the things that are going to go right and how you're going to be overwhelmed when they do, so that you actually have a game plan for your successes.
Right. How are you mentoring newer women attorneys who are coming into not just your firm, but I'm sure you meet a lot of them in the bar events that you attend, and all the other community events. How are you mentoring them to reach their fullest potential as attorneys?
I am contacted by young professionals, certainly a lot of law school students and recent graduates,
Mhm.
not just in law school, but across the professions. And a lot of times they're reaching out to me, and we work on everything from interviewing skills, reviewing their position statements, cover letters, talking through how to get their first job, how to negotiate their first salary, you name it. I think, have practiced just about everything that there is to practice. How do you deal with discrimination or being assertive or being successful, what to get involved in. And I do think a question that commonly comes up is, how do I find a mentor? And Lisa, I think you just hit it in the head, is that these young women have met someone that they think that they can connect with, i.e. me in this instance, or you, or whomever it is, and then they have the foresight to reach out and make that connection. So I don't think you need to wait to go through a formalized mentoring program, or to have your school match you up or your employer match you up. Reaching out to someone and saying, hey, I think you're awesome. Would you be willing to talk to me or look over my resume or help me with whatever? More than likely, that person is going to be willing to help you, and you can create your own organic mentoring relationships that are a really natural fit for both you and the mentor.
Right. And I think that's so important, particularly with women, because I was discussing the podcast with someone a couple weeks ago, and she said, women need to remember to help women and not be so, I guess we compare ourselves to other women more. Guys don't compare themselves to guys as far, well, I'm not a guy, so I don't know. I shouldn't say that.
Locker room, Lisa.
But, women are more, gosh, I don't want to say catty, but, women, it's hard for other women to see other women's success in many instances. I don't find that to be the case here in the Tampa Bay area, but basically what I hear you saying is advocate for yourself. Go find someone who you can relate to, and then say, hey, like you said, I think you're cool. Can I shadow you? Can I talk to you? Can you give me some pointer? I mean, how many women wouldn't say no? I don't think many. If someone told me all that, I'd be like, wow, you think I'm cool? Okay. I'll talk to you.
Absolutely. And I think part of it is that it's that women, to your point, are willing to help, but we all get so wrapped up in our lives and careers that we're not necessarily out there casting our net looking for additional fish. However, when they come to us, we are more than willing to give our time, drop whatever we're doing, to help the next generation succeed. So it's just a matter of, the mentee, and sometimes I tell my mentees as well that, they honestly are so awesome themselves that I assume that if I haven't heard from them in a while, that they did get the job they were going for, or they did achieve whatever grade they were looking for in school. And so if they don't continue to tell me that they need help, I don't always know that that's still something that I need to be assisting them with. So I think that that outreach really is awesome. And like you said, I think that once you reach out to people, they are usually more than happy to help.
Gotcha. Um, I was looking over your profile, your very long profile on your website. It's like scrolled for like a couple minutes, I feel like. And you spoke for, I remember when this happened, the Florida Bar Diversity Symposium. What was that all about?
We were talking a lot about these issues. There's been a renewal, I would say, in the profession lately to work on women's and diversity issues, particularly because there was a study about a year or two regarding women and minorities in the profession that honestly just wasn't favorable. And what it shows, not only here in Florida, but the national statistics are the same, is that even though we're now about 50-50 in law school classes, and although I'm talking about the legal industry, I think this is probably a relevant statistic to a lot of industries like finance, et cetera. So we're, about 50% in our classes, but we usually have about 18 to 25% of management positions, and usually about 16 to 19% of equity shareholder positions. So when it comes to owning the company or somehow leading the company, we are still woefully falling short. And that statistic has not changed in the last 20 years. It's held steady. And some years it actually declines a little bit. So that's been of concern to the profession of how can we truly create systemic change that has a workforce that looks like the communities in which we practice.
Right, because it's not a community of just men or a community of just white people. It's a community of, particularly in the Florida area. I mean, there's everything, everyone and everything, right?
Yes.
And what is it that, I'm going to ask you to stretch here a little bit. What do you think needs to happen for that number to increase?
One of the biggest things, I am so glad you asked me that, Lisa. This is actually really cool. So this past week, one of our law firms, one of our oldest law firms in Florida that was founded in 1925, just elected its first female managing shareholder in its 93-ish year history. And so I worked with the firm on coming up with some ideas of what they could do. And what we talked about with their leadership is, how can we actually create systemic change? That I think we hold ourselves back, and that most of these diversity symposiums and studies that we look at focus on what has been done in the past. So I have accepted as a truth that as a woman, I may be mistaken as the court reporter. I want to move beyond that. What can we do to actually keep me here, as opposed to just keeping the hour-long conversation about going over that? And I'm not saying it's not appropriate to have a forum event, but at some point I want to figure out, how can I actually create change? So for instance, recently we have been seeing lactation rooms that have been built in various law firms or courthouses. And that's a way that we can keep our breastfeeding mothers working if they have a place to go. And again, that can be implemented in a lot of industries. It can also double as a health room that helps non-women. Say you have a male that has diabetes and he needs a place to give himself his insulin shot. So it helps a cross sector of people. There are other changes, like actually implementing a diversity program, having family leave policies, creating compensation systems that don't disfavor women and minorities, truly understanding what is the difference between female and minority issues and how can we actually address them and not lump them together. There's a lot that can be done, I think, to move that needle forward that's going to take time, but it just isn't being done yet.
Yeah. And yeah, I totally understand that. And I feel like I have seen some of the lactation rooms, which was a bit of a surprise, but I like that you said it's not just for women, it's also for men. And you also mentioned the family leave. Like, it's perfectly okay for a woman to take maternity leave, but up until, I feel like up until recently, it wasn't cool for a man to take paternity leave, and now I see there are firms and there are companies who are saying, hey, they're two parents here. Why can't they take leave? So I do like that you're seeing it's not just for women, it's for everybody. And I think making it really inclusive like that kind of drives the point home that you're not just advocating for women necessarily, you're advocating for everybody.
Absolutely. And in again, what we're seeing is that clients, when they're putting out their RFPs for work, again, be it for public relations or an accounting firm, they want to, at least your larger companies, if you're competing for that work, they want to see diverse teams that are demanding it. And so if you don't have a diverse workforce, you won't be able to compete for that work. The other, example that we like to give in the legal industry, a lot of people are familiar with the Erin Andrews case and how poorly that went for Marriott and for the individual male. And the defendants in that case had an all-male trial team, and when they went to go examine Erin Andrews on the witness stand, if you ever watch any of that footage, it did not go well. And they asked a lot of questions that I don't think a woman would have asked Erin on the witness stand. And so would the outcome have been different? Maybe not. But if you have a diverse team that's actually thinking about like all the commercial blenders that we've seen, in terms of diversity, if you actually have a diverse workforce that's helping, with your thought process of the end product you're providing for clients, you may have much more successful outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Something while you were talking, something came to popped into my head. First of all, I want to go watch that Erin Andrews footage because that sounds pretty interesting. What do you guys think about, or you specifically think about all of this? That's, I was talking to a woman today, and we were talking about that often men don't have to worry about how they're looked at in a workplace. Like they don't have to worry about what their dressing looks like too provocatively, or like it's really odd. And I read this really great article that I wish I could remember now. I'll put it in the show notes, but it was an article about a woman was with a man for the whole day, and she was like, every time I have to make a concession because of my sex, I'm going to let you know about it. And it happened all day long. And as I was reading it, I was like, wow, that's crazy. I mean, do you feel like I wouldn't say the legal industry necessarily has to deal with that any more than any other industry, but do you feel like that's still prevalent in businesses nowadays, particularly more in the South, right? Well, Florida isn't really the South, but
Absolutely. There are certainly times you're going to find yourself as the only female in the room. So not necessarily to the egregious nature that you're talking about in terms of the sexual harassment and things like that we've been hearing about today. But you're going to have to figure out how to get a seat at the table, how to advocate for yourself. But one thing that I do like to remind people as well, at least this has been my experience, is that while certainly I think that women and minorities face greater challenges in terms of the adversities against us, what I have noticed too is that there are times that I have been either selected or hired because of being a woman, as well as not being a woman. So again, I'm not saying that the discrimination goes as much the other way as against us.
right.
You are finding that sometimes these days people are opening their eyes and saying, okay, I do value you for your skill set, and I'm going to bring you on for it. So that's kind of my good news I'd like to spread too.
Right. I may be naive, but I feel like a lot of what will maybe not, I'm not going to say stop what's happening, but I feel like education plays a big part in letting people know, hey, when this happens, this is how it affects me. I'm not Black, so I don't know what Black people go through. I'm not a white man, so I don't know what white men go through. I am a woman. I am I am gay. I do know what those people go through, But I think if we put ourselves in other people's shoes, or what I'm saying is educate people how it is to be in our shoes, I feel like 9 times out of 10, they're going to go, oh, I totally get it. I had no idea. It's not, I don't feel like it's always malicious. I feel like sometimes it's just like a lack of consideration. Does that make sense?
Either that and or awareness, the way that I think about it,
Yeah, awareness, right.
to the law firm partner, the reason I was saying that she has such a tremendous opportunity to affect change in the legal industry is because these issues are actually on her radar in a way that they were not on the male's radar previously, because he just hadn't experienced it. So, it's like, for instance, we would like to think it would occur to you that you need a maternity and a paternity leave policy.
Right.
Having had kids, that may not be the first thing that you're thinking about each morning when you call your executive board meeting to order. So to your point, I think not only getting people in key leadership positions that look different than they have traditionally will help us move the ball forward, and then doing diversity and education and inclusion training will bring us a long way.
Okay. Let's change directions here a little bit. You have come really far, I think, in the 10 years you've been practicing law. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years or in the next 10 years?
I don't honestly know the answer to that question, and I've been putting a lot of thought in it. I know that we have been preparing for this for the past week or so, but I'll tell you what I am resolved to doing, regardless of what capacity it's in, is continuing to help affect positive change, particularly for advancing women in the profession. And I don't just mean the legal profession, but in whatever their chosen profession is. And whether that's continuing to do it, as a side gig, so to speak, as a passion project, whether I ever start doing it full time, that I think is probably a question mark for me. But one of the nice things that has really helped me, Lisa, you mentioned having diverse interests. One of my pieces of advice is that it took me a long time to figure out what I was passionate about, probably like you with small magic. You've been a practitioner for a long time yourself. And so I do think that as you grow in your practice, if you can figure out what it is that you like to do, and then to actually create synergies around that and narrow your mission, I think that'll be really helpful to you, not only in terms of being more effective, but then also figuring out what you don't want to do and saying no as well.
Right. Right. Which you said you don't like to say no too often. So.
Right. So now at least I have a reason if I'm going to do it.
Right. Right.
In my scope.
Tell me a little bit about, you have your own side gig too, don't you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? About, it has to do with spreading sunshine, I think.
I do. So my passion project is called Spread Your Sunshine. And I formed that because what I found was that I was doing a lot of one-on-one mentoring. And while I love that, at some point in time, it almost became a competing full-time job. And I thought, how can I continue to help women, like we talked about earlier, who reach out to me? I don't want to say no. And yet I've got to figure out, for my own sake and for theirs, so that I can actually impact them, how can I bring these services to more people? And so the idea is to work on women's confidence and empowerment issues, to have resources and materials on that website, to be blogging. So it's in the works, definitely not finished. But what's amazing to me as well, and Lisa, you spoke earlier this year at the Women's Conference about something to the effect of let it bloom where you stand. I may be botching that a little bit. But for me, I launched my project before it was ready. And what's been phenomenal to me is the people that already understand the mission and have grasped onto it and felt empowered just by loosely talking about it, using the hashtag, incorporating it into the speeches that I've given. So I would encourage you that if you are going to, work on your passion project, don't wait till it's perfect. Get it out there.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah. I have a coach who says, she says it's not ready, aim, fire. She says it's aim, fire, and you'll get ready when you did after you pull the trigger.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, the way I've been handling things lately is I'm like, well, you're right. It's never going to be perfect. So just get it out there and do it. And you'll figure it out while you're doing it. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Gosh, I was just going to ask you a question and it's gone for a second. You do a lot of work in the community too. So, and I think something that, that I always hear, and I don't know, I'm not, I feel like I can straddle both sides of this argument. You know, women are often asked, how do you do it all? You're a woman and you have a household and you're in the community. How do you do? I don't know if men get asked that question, but I'm going to ask you that question. So only because I know how much you do. I, I'm not worried about your household, but you are out there. I mean, sometimes I see what you're doing on Facebook and I'm like, my God, I'm tired just watching. How do you do it? Okay. I know you're a lot younger than I am, but how do you fit all that in and then have time for Molly and time for Mike and time for you, like how do you get it all done?
So you hit the nail on the head, I think, with your last statement. How do you have time for you? I have realized I do get asked that question a lot. How do you do it all? You must not sleep, etc. Everybody has to sleep, so that's not the. I wish I could do all 24 hours. It's never going to happen. I do think that there is a lack of personal time in my life. That there are things I would love to work on or have some downtime. And if I think the last time I read a book was when I was like 8 years old. I mean, there's that downtime. But I also, there's two things I would share with you. One is that one day my husband and I were discussing this, and he said, this is such an awesome time in our lives. And it really flipped it on its head for me. And that he said, we're at the height of our careers. We're coming into the height of our careers. We have the opportunity to make significant impacts in our community. People care what we think. They want us to help. This may be the time to make hay in the sunshine. And that really helped me have a positive view on it. And if it's not your appetite, if you are someone that needs more downtime, recognize that and feed your soul. But for us, it has been a time that we really want to do the things we're doing. And so we're excited about them. On the note, though, I am glad you brought up the household, because I actually talked about this in a group about 2 weeks ago and heard that saying in a way that resonated with me for the first time in my life. So according to the Department of Labor, women spend about 0.8 to 0.9 more hours per day on the household than their male counterpart if they are in a male-female relationship. And I thought that was actually very low, not even having a child yet. I thought that seemed like a very low statistic, because it comes out a little shy of 6 hours per week. But where I'm going with this, and this is what resonated with me, is that I think we've all kind of known, what we may not have known it was just shy of 6 hours, but at some point we all knew, right, that probably the woman was spending more time. But here was the discussion that we had at the conference about advancing women in their chosen profession, is that how much of that is a woman, A, choosing a good partner, B, asking her partner for help, and then C, allowing her partner to help. Meaning that, if you ask your partner for help and he does a crummy job just to spite you and you want help, that's one thing. But, sometimes we are perfectionists that are demanding. We think we're the only ones that can do what we're doing. Or we think that we want to have that more close relationship with our pet or our kid. And so even though we complain about it, we actually covet it. And so at some point, I think you have to own the household piece of it if you do have control of that in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the number 3 resonated with me, letting them help you. I have a bit of a control issue in the kitchen, so I totally get that. I want to be mindful of your time, and so I'm going to wrap this up here in a few minutes, but I want to ask you a couple things. If people don't remember anything else we talked about today, what's the one thing that you would want them to know that maybe we haven't talked about, that this is like, I want people to know this?
My 3 pieces of advice are: 1, have a mentor. We've talked about that, but they are going to infinitely help you. Never think that any idea is too big or too small to run past someone. 2 brains are always better than 1. 2, spread your sunshine. Be positive. Everybody likes to work with someone positive, whether that's a family member, your clients, a team member. But having that sunshine, being confident, being empowered is going to take you a long way. And 3, again, we said it earlier, but plan to succeed and not to fail. Know that you more than likely are going to accomplish your goals. And that's not to say that failure isn't okay. Failure is absolutely okay, and it's an important part of learning. Yeah. But that shouldn't be our constant, what's keeping us up at night, which I think it really is most times for women. Instead, flip that on its head and think about, all right, what are you going to do when you reach your peak of success?
Right. That's great. A buddy of mine always says win or lose. He says fail doesn't exist, and it's win or learn. I'm sorry, not win or lose, win or learn. And that's always made me think, oh yeah, I'm not, I spoke to a mutual friend of ours, kids at college, and they asked, what was your biggest failure? And I said, I don't have any failures. I have learning opportunities. So I've either won or I've learned something that's helped me advance or grow or develop in some way. So what's next? What's next for Melanie?
Oh, that is tough. So for me, now that this year for me actually was personally challenging. We had a lot of infrastructure issues that we were working through at work that we solved in October. So that was a really good milestone. And I had a really close death in my family that prevented me from taking my project as far as I wanted to. So now that I have, really kind of come full circle and caught up at work, I think putting my time back into Spread Your Sunshine and starting to blog and get more materials out there to help women is just, something I'm passionate about. And particularly given the number of opportunities now that I have put it out there to be included on diversity and inclusion panels and training materials, I have just learned so much. I feel like half the material I got this afternoon has really come from once I put that out there and started working on these issues. So I'm just excited to keep learning and then bringing it back and paying it forward.
That's awesome. I want to thank you. First of all, I thank you for your friendship. I mean, you're a dear friend, and I couldn't ask for a better seminal friend. But I do want to say, I love the message of Spread Your Sunshine. I think what you're doing in our community is so important. And I think there couldn't be a better voice than someone like you to be kind of the face for here's what's possible. Here's the energy that you have and the passion that you obviously have. And, I was looking at the website and all of these accolades. I mean, so well deserved. And so I want to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your schedule today. I know you're super busy. And I also want to thank you even more than that for putting so much back into our community. I think it's really important, and I think it does make a difference. And I think I will leave with that. Unless there's anything you feel like burning that you want to say, I'll just say thank you again.
Likewise, I think you're awesome, and I'm just so excited for your Small Magic project and to learn more about it. You rock.
You rock too. Listen, you guys, y'all been listening to the Small Magic podcast with Melanie Griffin. You can go check out her profile as well. It's probably a longer read than my latest ebook. But check out Melanie and see all the cool stuff she's doing. Follow Spread Your Sun. It's Spread Your Sun. The hashtag Spread Your Sunshine, right?
Yep.
And you have your own Instagram profile for that?
Yeah. So I have Spread Your Sunshine is on Facebook and on Instagram, and then it's Sunshine Women on Twitter.
Perfect. So follow her. She will love to hear from you. And thank you so much, Melanie. Hopefully I'll get to see you in person sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa.
All right. Take care. You've been listening to the Small Magic Podcast. Just a reminder to you to ask your doctor if the advice on the podcast is right for you. Eat your veggies, get enough sleep, eat dessert first, smile often, and indulge in plenty of laughter by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast gatherer. And remember, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and learn more at lisademmi.com. That's LISADEMMI.com. Now go out there and perform some small magic.